Good afternoon, councillors. Welcome along. I declare this meeting open. Welcome to our members of the public. Great to see you all here. There are no announcements. We have Councillor Jones is on leave of absence. I have a declaration of financial interest from Councillor Steck relating to 10.41. Are there any further declarations of interest, councillors? Thank you. Someone prepared to move the minutes of the last ordinary council meeting? Councillor Cook, Councillor Giles, all in favour? That's approved unanimously, thank you. And someone prepared to move those three committee meeting minutes, please? Councillor McCleary, Councillor Hayward, all in favour? It's carried unanimously, thank you. Are there any petitions, councillors? Have a request from TransScore and Planning Solutions to present on item 10.41. All those who approve, please indicate. That's approved. Gentlemen, when the time comes, I'll invite you up. 8.41. Someone prepared to move. We receive the report from the two councillors. Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Giles, all in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So coming out for discussion, councillors, are items 10.23, 10.41, 10.45, 10.46. Are there any other items that councillors wish to raise? Can someone move the balance, please? Councillor Hayward, Councillor Cook, all in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So item 10.23 requires an absolute majority. Someone prepared to move that? Councillor McGuinness, seconder. Councillor Warnock. Any debate on this one? I'll put it all in favour. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. 10.41. Thanks, Councillor Steck. Mr. Boardbar and Mr. Underwood, welcome along. You can come up to the Ross. You know what to do. You both know what to do. So there's a clock in front of me here to guide you on the timing, which we've discussed, so welcome.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, officers, and thank you for the opportunity and good evening. My name is Behnam Boardbar. I'm Managing Director of TransScore, Traffic Engineers and Transport Planners. I will be speaking on item 10.4.1 and for the approval recommended by officers, but against condition 24 of the approval. If I could refer you to page 28 of the agenda, on top of the page under item 24, there is a reference to a need for a truncation from the subject site, and further on page 29 under items A to D, the officers provide reasoning and justifications for that particular condition. If I could take you through those conditions one by one. Condition A refers to the intersection is proposed to be upgraded in the next financial year to improve sight lines. First of all, there is no evidence provided in the officer's report that there is a sightline problem at that intersection. In fact, we have undertaken our own assessment, and in a submission that I hope you've had the opportunity to look through, which was provided by Mr. Underwood, it's demonstrated that sight lines at the intersection are in accordance to Austroad guidelines. Secondly, there is no plan provided as part of the upgrade of that intersection for the next financial year that demonstrates the need for the truncation. Under item B, the officers refer to having the need for the truncation so they can have a robust design solution for the future, maybe a roundabout, maybe a left-hand lane. Again, no decision has been made that what intersection treatment in the medium to long term will be implemented, and if that intersection treatment in fact requires this truncation. Another important fact that Mr. Underwood would elaborate on is that there is no need and nexus between an intersection at that location and the proposed development. Under item C, there is a discussion about room for utilities, extra room for utilities. Again, there is no details provided that what utilities and how and why. And why is that related to this development? Again, that particular reasoning fails the need and nexus test in law. Under item D, they talk about the lack of truncation does not allow for a pedestrian refuge and improvement to pedestrian. Again, no plan is provided to show what sort of refuge and why that refuge is linked to the need for truncation. Once again, there is no demonstration of need and nexus of that particular treatment to this proposed development. So all the reasoning, in our view, is not justified. There is no detail provided. And based on my experience, it just fails to be a lawful condition. And it also fails to establish the need and nexus test in law. With respect, there has been some incorrect statement made in the agenda with respect to Aldi development and the truncation at Spencer and Edward Street. We were the traffic engineers for Aldi development. As part of the development application conditions of approval, the subdivision conditions of approval, there was no requirement for any truncation. In fact, the truncation at that corner has been established many, many years ago before Aldi's development. Also, as I mentioned earlier, sightlines are fine at that intersection, and sightline or lack of it cannot be used as a reason for the truncation. So we respectfully request councillors to set aside condition 24 and approve the development. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. Have a seat. Mr. Underwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors. I won't reiterate what Mr. Boardbar's gone over. What I would like to do is give you a bit of background. We're here today to help council to resolve a conflict between ourselves and the council's officers. The point of conflict is conditions 23A and condition 24, which is what Mr. Boardbar has been speaking about. We'd like council's help to resolve this issue and avoid going through a SAP process. I want to briefly talk about the need and nexus argument, together with some practical issues and also how other examples may be to this particular situation. To begin with, the need and nexus argument mentioned by Mr. Boardbar, it's referred to also as a Newbury test. It's a test of the validity of conditions. It dates back to 1981, so it's older than I am. It has also stood the test of time, and there has been SAT decisions and court decisions fairly recently, including one in the City of Stirling relating to a truncation that was removed by the tribunal. The Newbury test states that conditions must fairly and reasonably relate to the development which is proposed. We think these two conditions fail that test. The pedestrian traffic. We've been asked to upgrade the Spencer Street footpath on the basis that there will be additional pedestrian traffic. We don't think there's any evidence of that. We're proposing a showroom development replacing what's there already, which is a bow repairs, tyre repair facility. Anecdotally, I have on several occasions dropped off my car to have its tyres changed in Fremantle, Northbridge, and then walked on to grab a coffee or go to work or do a spot of shopping. I've never done that, attending a rug showroom or a furniture showroom of the like. I just don't think there's any evidence that what's proposed will increase pedestrian traffic, and therefore there's no need or nexus between what we're proposing and the need to upgrade a footpath. The sightline, I'm not going to go over that because I think Mr. Boardbar's done a great job of summarising that particular issue. And moving on beyond that, if council were to go and start requiring developers to upgrade road infrastructure adjacent to their sites, council would simply lose all control of the ability to plan for and upgrade footpath infrastructure. It'd be ludicrous to suggest that person A down the road would be required to upgrade their bit, person B might come along 5-10 years later, upgrade their bit. In the meantime, council and the city's administration needs to be able to plan for the upgrade of its infrastructure. It can't simply defer the responsibility onto adjoining landowners who would lose all control of the process. Finally, the officers might point to other examples where a truncation or a footpath upgrade condition has been applied elsewhere, and Audi's probably a particularly poor example, but there might be others that the officers may point to. In response, the Newbury test for the validity of conditions, it doesn't allow a condition to be imposed on one site just simply because it might have been improperly imposed elsewhere. Simply put, two wrongs don't make a right. On that basis, we're requesting that council delete condition 23A and 24. And on a final minor point, we're also seeking a change to 24B. It relates to the relocation of a power pole. We think there's a design solution, and we've had a verbal discussion with the city's officers where they tend to agree that there could be a design solution. So we're simply asking that condition be modified slightly to require that power pole relocation only occur if necessary. On that basis, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood. Councillors, I have some questions that I want to raise. I'm sure some of you may as well. And if we are in a position where we haven't got our minds clear on this outcome tonight, we might defer it for another round of meetings. But Acting CEO, through you to our Director of Works and Services and also to the Manager of Planning, I'd like responses on both those points from our officers before we consider this matter. One was the site view, the truncation. The other one was the upgrading of the footpath, and I think you referred to the Newbury rules. Perhaps I need to be enlightened on that. So, thank you.
Okay. Just bringing those points in order as best as I can. The nexus demonstration, so in relation to the need for a road truncation, the nexus is demonstrated by the fact that A, no truncation currently exists. B, that there is presently development located on the land within the area requiring truncation. C, that the application development approval proposes development on the same portion of land located within the area requiring truncation. And D, that the proposed development and use of the land must be set back from the corner of the road intersection in accordance with IPUA and WOPC policy. Ensuring that this occurs is not satisfied by the landowners merely promising that this will occur and remain so in perpetuity, as it can only be guaranteed by the securing the truncation into the road reserve. In relation to the upgrading of the Spencer Street segment of pedestrian footpath, the nexus is demonstrated by the fact that A, the pedestrian footpath immediately adjoins the premises, B, that the customer's employees accessing the subject site by foot must traverse the road verge using the pedestrian footpath, and C, that a reasonable person can assume that development will, on the balance of probability, significantly increase the amount of pedestrian traffic accessing the premises as customers and employees. Decision-making authorities are not obliged to estimate the exact number of additional pedestrians expected to be generated by such a straightforward development proposal. Instead, they are obliged to substantiate the condition and adequacy of the existing infrastructure servicing the lot when seeking a contribution to improve the level or standard in order to meet the likely increased pedestrian traffic demands. In the case quoted, I won't go into the one that was provided to you, but that was referring to a two-lot subdivision, 5 k's north of Albany. It was a rural subdivision that Mr Underwood was referring to. The 3 conditions related to underground power, an environmental easement and a bushfire management requirement. So he has not supplied us with his example of a road truncation. Nevertheless, I can advise you that that case he provided was not actually refused, simply that the Supreme Court of Appeal needed for it to be further justified by the SAT and to ensure a fair and proper consideration was given to the appeal. Okay. In relation to the need for the footpath, the City undertakes the construction and upgrading of its pedestrian footpath network as a normal part of its operations according to its adopted capital works program. The City of Bunbury would not abandon entirely the obligations of undertaking that. The City of Bunbury, like other local governments, may ask for developers benefiting from an approval to make a fair and reasonable contribution to the upgrading of the infrastructure that services their development in accordance with well-established precedents in law and the State Planning Policy 3.6, Development Contributions for Infrastructure. It should also be noted that ALDI accepted its corporate responsibility to the City when it funded the footpath extension along Edward Street as a condition of their development and subdivision approval, which is incorrectly stated by the proponent. It has been stated by the applicant's representative that unlike a showroom, pedestrian access is not as important for a supermarket. This application was assessed on its individual merits and its impacts and was not conflated with the previous consideration of any other separate development approvals. Regardless, it is worth noting that the definition of a showroom use means a premises used to sell by retail a wide range of goods and accessories, and that other showroom uses are also located in the adjoining city centre zone, which largely operate with no distinct difference to a shop. Therefore, showrooms can and do have relatively high levels of customer patronage as comparable to a shop, such that the factor of walkability does apply to the proposed showroom and that it would be misleading to pretend otherwise. In evaluating the road truncation requirement on the corner of Edward Street and Spencer Street, ensuring the requirement for a truncation was included as part of the ALDI development as a deliberate consideration undertaken by the City of Bunbury, as the presence of a satisfactory truncation was explicitly checked for as part of the City of Bunbury review of the proposed plan of subdivision, that is the draft survey diagram, that was referred to the City by the WAPC. The subdivision plan was prepared to accommodate both the land swap arrangement and the further subdivision of Lot 100 into 2 land parcels. The draft survey diagram was lodged for approval, incorporated the necessary truncation to the City's satisfaction, and therefore was no need to include the standard applied notation requiring the truncation as a condition. It has been incorrectly stated by the applicant's representative that the condition for ALDI to construct the footpath along Edward Street arose as part of that land swap agreement. It did not. The requirement for the footpath construction along the full length of Edward Street was indeed imposed in a combination of a condition of the development approval in condition 13 and as a condition of subdivision approval, which was condition 10. It has been stated by the applicant's representative that sightlines will comply provided landscaping at the corner is kept at a height of 0.5 metres or less. However, the local government has an obligation to expect more than casual suggestion that regular pruning by the landowner will guarantee public safety of all road users in perpetuity, as this can only be guaranteed by the securing of a truncation into the road reserve. The proposed development, including landscaping, must be set back from the corner of the road intersection in accordance with IPWA guidelines and WAPC policy. The advice that sightlines are adequate is also predicated upon the unstated assumption that the intersection treatment will remain unchanged with stop line. However, promoting and accepting untruncated intersections with sightlines limited to a single vehicle that must be at a complete stop before entering the street does not represent sound road design practice and would have the consequence of limiting the local government's ability to upgrade the intersection with more appropriate traffic control measures into the future, such as a free-flowing give-way arrangement via a roundabout, which in the long term may need to be explored with the intensification of land uses in and around the Cornwall Street area under the new scheme, for example, due to the department store and high-density mixed-use development. Modification of condition 23B is not necessary at this time. The proposed modification would only create ambiguity in enforcement and does not represent sound condition drafting. The proposed development plan shows the power pole in a location that poses an unacceptable degree of road safety risk to vehicle accessing, egressing the subject site, and hence moving the pole will be necessary. Western Power will not assume responsibility for moving the power pole, which is located in the local government's road reserve. Okay. This condition must remain as written because it goes with the development plans as submitted. In this circumstance, the proponent has two options: to submit a revised development plan showing an alternative design solution as requested that avoids the risk and thus negates the need for the condition altogether, which, subject to Council's decision on an amendment delegation DASP 03, can be accommodated subsequently by officers under delegation. Or B, resolve the issue through approving of the detailed design plans for all access car parking and pedestrian movement arrangements that is required to be submitted in accordance with condition 16 of this development approval, which would then satisfy and enable the city to clear condition 23B as written now without the need for resubmitted development plans. Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillors, if you've got any further questions, I think there's a case here for this being sent back to the negotiating table. We want a development to occur, but unless someone's very clear, Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think that our executive has been very clear and concise in going through and explaining what is required, and I'm confident to put this motion forward.
You're moving that executive recommendation.
Yes,
thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Kelly, Councillor McCleary.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Kelly.
Yes, I will, Mr Mayor. Look, I thank the proponent and I thank our staff for providing the positions that they hold. It is indeed sometimes unfortunate that we can't resolve these issues prior to coming to council, or at least negotiate our way through them. But in listening to the position put by Mr Farnworth, Mr Mayor, the thing that struck me most important was the future planning of this area. It is a crucial area in Bunbury, key intersection, and what's there at the moment needs to be set up for the future. I think in explaining the reason for the truncation and also the reason for the footpath, which I've no issue with the footpath, Mr Mayor, I think that one's a given. I think that we're on solid ground here. These are not unreasonable conditions. They're conditions that would apply to a development. The WAPC has already had, by the sound of it, some sort of nod on it, and the way Mr Farnworth explained it, I think it was quite clear that these are just ordinary, reasonable conditions applied to a development that we welcome in the city. So I'm happy to support the recommendation as it is, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Is the Speaker against?
Just a quick question, if I may, Mr
Sure,
Mayor.
Councillor Hogan.
I was just interested to know if the truncation wasn't one of the conditions, what would that mean for the future when, say, in 5 years' time, it needs to be, what's the process that happens at that point?
Sure. Acting CEO, do you have a response?
Through Mr Mayor, the local governments are permitted to compulsorily acquire land. The difficulty would be that if there's development occurred on that land, that the additional value of, if you like, retrofitting for a truncation may see significant costs other than just the cost of the land. But there is an ability for local governments to compulsorily acquire land.
Okay. Is there a Speaker against? Councillor Cook.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move that the debate be adjourned for two sessions in order to achieve a negotiated outcome.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Warnock. I'll put that. All in favour, please indicate. Those against? That's carried. So that's the decision. We're deferring it for one round of council meetings. So for four, did you say 2 rounds? Not quite yet. Okay. 10.45. Someone prepared to move that? We need an absolute majority on these two left. Someone prepared to move? 10.45. Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Seconder? Councillor Giles, thank you. Any discussion? I'll put it all in favour. It's carried unanimously. 10.46. Councillor Steck.
Sorry, sir, can I just ask a question, please?
Yes.
It's just that with this amendment to the current schedules of what we actually do, why is this actually necessary?
Yeah, that's explained in the officer's report, but would you mind, through you, Mr Acting CEO, Mr Farnsworth, just briefly explaining why? Thank you.
No problem. It's a normal historical practice for us to have, and we even have a fee for reconsidering applications so that we don't have to go back through the full process again, just for minor little changes. Unfortunately, the new regulations have actually created a thing So we had it dealt with under our old scheme, but the new regulations for the whole state actually include a clause about reconsideration. Because it's created a clause, it's a thing now. So we have to refer to it explicitly as the head of power when we exercise that decision.
Thank you. So,
Just a further question, if I may, sir. Given the head of power is actually a council decision, then I'm just a bit concerned then as to, will that come back to the council, or will it just be dropping off and councillors won't know about it?
If we approve this, we're delegating that authority to our officers, Councillor Steck. You're moving it? Thank you. Councillor Miguel moves. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hayward. Before you speak, Councillor Miguel, do you want to speak? Councillor Hayward, do you want to speak? Speaker against, Councillor Steck.
Thank you, sir. I'm not in the favour of delegating authority to staff to actually cancel development approvals without the knowledge of councillors themselves. That's almost the same as a couple of years ago when we were almost going to delegate the power to refuse back to staff, and it would never come to council. This is a dangerous precedent, and I urge you not to vote for it.
Speaker for. Councillor Miguel, do you wish to... I'll put it all in favour. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those against? Councillor Steck and McCleary record their names against. The rest were in favour. That's carried. Thank you. There is a late item, I think. Has it been removed? Yeah. Can I have someone move 14.1, please? That is to consider this matter. Thank you, Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Cook, all in favour? That's carried. So this was discussed at the briefing last Tuesday for those who were there. Does anybody have any further questions on this matter before I ask a mover? Well, we haven't moved it yet, Councillor Steck. Question, Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I see we are talking this, aren't we?
We're talking about the pump.
Pump, yes. Okay, no, it's the other one.
Okay, thank you. Can I have someone move the executive recommendation, please? Councillor Hayward, seconder. Councillor Cook. Councillor Hayward? Councillor Cook? Speaker against?
I just wanted to move an amendment to make the part 2, and that would be that any of the monies that are expended on this item are not part of the contingency money. I know it's in the report, I just want it part of the actual motion itself. So I move that amendment, sir.
I don't think that's necessary, Councillor Steck. I'll ask the CEO.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the purpose of a contingency is for unplanned elements of a contract. If we are not permitted to use the contingency for this variation to the contract, then we would need to seek endorsement from council to use funds from another source. Yeah,
so I suggest you speak against it.
But actually in the report...
Councillor Steele, take a seat, please.
I've got a question.
No,
I have a question, thank you.
Okay.
We are allowed to have questions in this chamber. In the report it actually says, therefore no funds from the project contingency are required. So I would like clarification on what the CEO just said, because he said we are going to use contingencies, but the report actually to us has said that we aren't going to use them.
Mr Acting CEO, would you respond to that seeking of clarification?
So on page 53 of the report, which I think is what Councillor Steele is referring to, and the Director of Works and Services might add some further clarification. Certainly there was a project, there's a provisional sum within the project, so I think what we're suggesting outside of these funds, there'll be no additional funds from the contingency, but perhaps Mr Harris might like to further explain.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Essentially what it is there was one project for putting the bore down, and there's about 107,000 left in that project, and then we had a provisional sum within the project budget overall of 156, so between those two we've got about 260,000. The variation is for 218,000, so there will be no funds used from the contingency amount.
Thank you. Speaker against? I'll put it all in favour. Those against? It's carried. Councillor Steele and Steck record their names against. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. I declare this meeting closed at 5, almost